Alrighty. So firstly, I'd like to begin this presentation by asking the listener to be willing to consider one of two possible conclusions as you listen to the following arguments. Number one, that free will does not exist. But if that option is too alien and too unappealing to you, I'll offer a second option as a middle way. That if free will exists, it is but a small player in the total set of the actual causes of our behavior. This is what I'll be calling causality or determinism. So to begin this, let's explore what free will is up against. So you have the idea of free will on the one hand and what it's up against on the other hand. And so we can begin at the level of the body, right? So we know that free will doesn't cause your blood circulation, cellular reproduction, metabolism, healing, or all sorts of bodily functions, right? You also didn't choose your parents, the genetic circumstance, your upbringing, what temperament you were born into, or how aging affects the development of your behavior. These complex features shape our body and behaviors independently of our free will. But that's just us at the level of the body. In addition to that, we're members of society, right? We didn't choose the circumstance we were born in at the level of culture, the political and historical context, the religious and philosophical context, or the very language that we do, which does so much to shape the way we're able to think, right? As psychology students, we study the effects of social contagion, such as mob mentality, subliminal messaging, and the effects of coercion by group or authority figures, right? Exemplified in the famous Milgram experiment, for example. We should also consider how important first impressions are in determining how we behave with other people, right? We make snap decisions all the time that affect our behavior unconsciously. Again, there's more that could be said at the level of what affects our behavior socially. But in addition to social people, we are animals, right? Humans are animals, right? And so with that, we have millions of years of evolutionary history forming our behaviors, our dispositions, and we come equipped with complex instincts, reflexes, muscle memory, and we continuously develop and reinforce patterns of complex conditioning, habits, addictions that form our behaviors. We also don't choose how it is that our environment shape what we can and cannot do, right? And so it's worth to kind of expand our view a bit and to go into the rest of nature, right? And so I suspect that nobody here thinks that to explain the behaviors of plants or bacteria is that you need free will, right? In fact, you probably only think that humans are the only organism that have free will. So in other words, you accept that determinism explains the rest of what's going on in the rest of the animal kingdom in terms of behavior. So the absence of free will leaves scientific laws to explain the motion of the stars, the laws of physics and chemistry, and the behavior of other animals. We don't need free will to explain how it is that millions of other species of animals behave, right? I'm simply asking you to add one more species of ape to that list of animals, right? So I really don't think it's that crazy to think that what effectively explains the rest of the animal kingdom overlaps with our species. And that's essentially what I'm arguing for. So far, I've sketched a picture of what free will is up against. And I think if it's been successful, that the scope that free will inhabits has been shrinking, right? So what about within that scope? How constant is free will exactly, right? So I think we would all agree that human embryos and babies don't have free will. So we don't begin with it, right? And the elderly, people with advanced dementia or people with other forms of mental illness seem to lose it, right? So we may not end with it. So we may not start or end with it. But what about in between? What about the approximately 1/3 of our time in our lives that we spend asleep or otherwise unconscious, right? What about the behaviors of people that are sleepwalking or people with narcolepsy, right? How does that affect our picture of free will within that window? It's also worthwhile that this sort of brings up the topic of the unconscious, right? Which is something worth thinking about, right? Because the unconscious plays a huge role in our behavior. We're probably all here familiar with the analogy of the mind to an iceberg, right? We have, only a small part of the mind is conscious, and the vast majority of it is unconscious, right? And the contents of our unconscious are not up to us to choose, but they do act on us, right? Kind of a pretty vivid demonstration of this is people with PTSD or phobias or other forms of afflictions where the contents of their unconscious really restricts their behaviors, and you can have flashbacks and these kind of episodes that really control your behavior in a way that our will has nothing to do with where these things come from and control us. In general, so that's kind of the abnormal psychology side of things. But for even just normal psychology, right, this different mental states we experience form our behaviors. Just think about how different our behavioral dispositions are, for example, when you're angry versus when you're in love or when you're in grief, right? And think about how differently your mental dispositions are according to the environment you find yourself in, right? Compare being at a party or at a concert versus at being at a funeral or at being at work versus at home, right? Think about how much the environment shapes our thinking and ability to act in our environment. In addition to the environment, we have patterns of thought, patterns of behavior, patterns of mental state that structure the content of what we're thinking moment to moment. And these patterns can become rigid, especially with age. And so what we know, in addition, shapes what we can and cannot do. You can't do a thing you don't know how to do, right? That just seems obvious. And so I'd like to give a demonstration now. So I hope you guys and anybody listening to this will play along for the sake of clarity here. But so I'd like you to pick a movie. Choose any movie you like. It could be a movie you've seen, could be a movie you just know of, doesn't matter what it is. Just pick a movie. So by now you've probably had enough time to pick a movie. So go ahead and pick a different movie. Forget about that movie and pick a different one, right? And really be sensitive to what's going on in your head as this is happening, right? So as you pick another movie, you probably have a few movies popping up now. And so you probably have a second movie picked up. Again, go ahead and forget that. And pick a third movie. Really pay attention as a matter of subjective experience, what's going on in your head right now. So as you pick a third movie, okay? So you probably had enough time to pick a third movie. Now you'll notice what didn't happen is it's not that all the movies you know appeared before you, you just selected through them. No, they just started popping into consciousness. They started percolating on their own, right? It was images, it was names, it was all sorts of mental associations that you didn't choose. They just popped in there, right? And before they were conscious, it's a total mystery where they came from, right? And the order in which they appeared is also a mystery, right? You know the third movie you chose just as well as you know the first. Why the order that they came into, right? Why did those movies come into mind and not other movies you know, right? So if you didn't pick the Wizard of Oz, right? Why didn't you pick it? You know the Wizard of Oz. Why wasn't it available to you? And the answer is because the inner machinations of the unconscious mind that bring thoughts into consciousness are a total mystery, right? Before thoughts are conscious, where they come from, we have no idea, right? And these influence our behaviors at every given moment. So with this movie demonstration, I attempt to show the unwilled nature of thoughts successfully appearing in them. But what about the opposite? What about when you draw a blank, like the tip of the tongue?
You're at the 2-minute mark.
Okay, cool. What about the tip of the tongue syndrome, right? Where a word or a name or a reference that you know is just not available to you, right? You can try your hardest to conjure it and fail, right? And sometimes later it'll pop up to you, like a flash of lightning, like a bolt of lightning out of nowhere, right? Maybe when the context isn't even available to you anymore, right? That too is a total mystery. Why was it available to you in that moment when you didn't try to have it, and it wasn't available when you did try to have it, right? That's a failure of the idea of free will, right? Because you know it, but it just wasn't available to you, no matter how hard you tried to bring it into consciousness. Another example of this would be Freudian slips and these other kinds of unconscious slips that we have where there's other stuff going on in the unconscious that come to light in our manifest behavior, right? And this raises a question: what else is going on back there that we don't know of and we don't have any willed influence over? It's deeply mysterious. And this process of the brain doing its own thing happens all the time. In fact, it's happening at this very moment, right? As I speak and make little noises with my face, your brain effortlessly converts these into words and ideas and concepts, right? Just to prove that, try not to understand these little noises as English. Go ahead. Use your free will not to understand English. It cannot be done. It's automatic. And with that, I conclude my presentation.
Nice.